So if you're here, I assume that either you're curious, you are too sleepy, or maybe you feel like you're not sleeping enough. The odds are pretty good that you, at least at some point, have had trouble sleeping, because about a third, maybe even almost a half of adults have had some point where they were not sleeping well for 3 or more days. We know what that's like. We know it's frustrating. We know that it can be scary. I'd like to assure you that our bodies want to sleep. Sleep is a lot like eating. You can have a time when you don't really feel that hungry, or you're hungry, but you just can't seem to eat, or something's turning you off, but eventually your body will make you eat. And the same thing is true with sleep. It's just a matter of trying to find that right balance between the things that in our body that make us need to sleep, and then the things that get in the way of us sleeping, which seem to be all too plentiful. So when I was in high school, I had a tendency to procrastinate. And let's just pretend that that was only high school, right? But yeah, I had a tendency of procrastinating. So it might be like the night before something was due, and I had this strategy. I would like work on stuff, and then as I started getting kind of tired, I would sometimes think, okay, well, I'm just gonna sleep for a little bit because I gotta get back up and do stuff. So I would lay on the floor. It was carpeted, but it wasn't super comfortable. And, you know, a lot of times I didn't wake up when I thought I wanted to. So what's the problem with this I'll lay on the floor thing? Well, there's several. First of all, we need to sleep deeply. The way that sleep works, a lot of people have heard that there are 4 stages of sleep plus REM. So basically you can think of it as like shallow sleep, kind of like if you're in water and the waves are up here. So there's a shallow sleep, and then we go into a deeper sleep, and then go into REM sleep, and then go back up. And the cycle repeats itself about every 90 minutes. There is some variation, might be closer to 75 for some people. And people usually go through 4 or 5 cycles through the course of the night, which is where you might get, about 6-7.5 hours of sleep. Well, the problem with me trying to lay on the floor and trying to get a shorter amount of sleep is that the first couple cycles during the night are the most important for restoring your brain and getting you ready for the next day. They're the most important for your memory and being able to think straight and being able to make decisions and even coordination, being able to drive a car. So if I was going to try and do that like 2 or 3 hours sleep, well, that's going to disrupt those first 5 hours, which is a problem. Now, another obvious problem, as I alluded to, is that I might have this plan to only sleep 3 or 4 hours, or maybe just 2. But that, what we call sleep drive, that buildup in the body that says, yeah, you really need to sleep, if it gets strong enough, you will not wake up. For a lot of people who have trouble sleeping, that probably sounds really great. And it can be, but it also can be a real frustration, because if you are sleep deprived, you could find yourself sleeping when you don't want to. You could find yourself dozing off at a traffic light. You could find yourself falling asleep on a conversation or in a meeting. So it's kind of a good news, bad news thing, right? There's a point where our body says, you will sleep, and there's nothing that you can do to stop it. And there are chemicals in the body that just build up and build up and build up, and absolutely can only be quenched by getting sleep. So that's sleep drive. Well, the common thing, as I mentioned, is that a lot of people have trouble sleeping. So that is an issue of arousal. Now, being in bed and being aroused, I guess whether or not it's a problem depends on context, right? But what we find a lot of times is that there are things that are signaling our brains to be awake. It could be that internal clock that we have, the circadian rhythm, maybe that's out of whack. because that rhythm usually will push us to be more wakeful through the day as we're exposed to sunlight primarily. And then that circadian rhythm, the drive to be awake decreases around to the point that the sleep drive that's pushing us to fall asleep kind of overcomes that. And it should work out such that your wakefulness is decreasing in the evening or whenever it is you need to sleep, while your sleepiness is taking over. So, but the problem is that aside from something like sunlight that can make us feel wakeful, there are other things. Light of any sort actually does tend to make us more awake. If you have blue light glasses, if you set your tablet on, what is that, like evening mode, yeah, it helps, but really our brains just like the light. And when you see that light, you're going to be more awake. It's a pain for those of us who love our phones, who love our tablets, who like to watch TV, because a lot of those things are fun and they're relaxing. But the bad news is that the light is going to affect you. Other things that definitely can get in the way of sleep, as I mentioned, the wakefulness, there's something called orexin. Orexin is a hormone in the brain that tries to keep us awake. And for some people, that orexin is at too high of a level at night when we don't want it to be. Or, kind of interestingly, if there's not enough orexin in the daytime, people get things like narcolepsy, where they should be awake, but all of a sudden they doze off. So that can be an issue. Now, by far, what I see is that our brains can get so excited about something or other, a lot of times things that aren't very pleasant, and that can keep us from falling asleep. So I don't camp. I know here in Colorado, a lot of people do, but I don't camp. I know that there are bears out there, not something I'm excited about. I do try and picture if you were in a tent and you heard a bear coming along and you're thinking, this probably isn't going to go so well or might not go so well. If you turned over and fell back asleep, I would be so surprised. Why? Because that fight or flight is telling you, don't fall asleep, right? I like to tell people, if you're being chased by a bear, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to get away, you run like crazy, climb, fight, whatever, and you escape, or you don't make it and you get caught by the bear. Either way, falling asleep shouldn't happen, right? So our bodies are primed to keep us awake, because if there's real danger, there should be pretty much nothing that makes you sleep aside from being completely incapacitated. And that's where the challenge can come. I do counseling, I prescribe medication, and a lot of times we're looking at medication to try to help fall asleep. But how much medication would it take to make you sleep if a bear is chasing you? Probably an awful lot. And maybe, send you into a coma, which obviously I don't want to do. And I talk about fight or flight because what that also means is that there is being awake. Okay, there's wakefulness, like maybe you're on a flight all night and, overnight flight, and you feel awake. You're not stressed out about anything. You don't have to do anything, but you just kind of feel awake. But then there's also anxiety. And anxiety, among many things, keeps us awake. And so a lot of the strategies that really are at the heart of trying to help us sleep when there are problems really are geared toward dealing with anxiety. So you might wonder, okay, is it that I'm just being too wakeful, or is it the anxiety? How do I know? Well, one thought I have is think about the daytime. And what if you were stopping and you just sat down and you weren't doing anything, you weren't looking at anything? Would you be able to relax? Or would you still have your mind just going or feeling tense? If that's the case, then what I would say is that anxiety may be part of the issue with falling asleep, but it also probably is part of the issue in your daytime. And for the sake of your quality of life, we want to deal with the anxiety in the daytime as well as at night. And in those cases, yes, maybe we can try to manage the anxiety at nighttime, but we want to look at more comprehensive strategies to help you with anxiety all through the day.